Hello, I'm Steve Suggs. I'm the co-developer of the Recruit the Best system. My business partner, Lance Cooper, founded our company, Sales Managed Solutions. He and I have worked together to develop this best practice recruiting system. Yes, it's a recruiting system with some processes, some tools, and some skills. Well, a lot of skills. It's all here in the Can They Sell book and the Companion Field Manual. Thank you for joining me for the Recruit the Best Team webinar. Get ready to learn how to find and recruit the best team members who can really sell, and service team members who can pivot. Let's begin with the most impactful reason to master the knowledge and tools of a system that helps us make better hiring decisions. To understand the full impact of hiring the wrong team member, Curtis Gilbert, sales leader in West Palm Beach, Florida, conducted a study and discovered that it cost an agent $70,000 per year when an agent hires a mediocre selling team member versus a high-producing team member. Money is lost in areas that include things like training cost, lost sales, licensing expense, lost renewals, and low team morale. As an agent, you also work longer hours. You're more stressed, and you spend less time with your friends and family when you don't have the right team members in place. On this webinar, you'll learn the answer to the following questions. What do I look for to choose the best from the rest? You'll learn the 5 dimensions of the best salesperson who can sell in a high-activity, high-rejection environment. How do I look for these traits and skills? This section helps you measure the 5 dimensions using tools and steps. Where do I find enough of the best salespeople? We'll explore all the sources for finding more qualified candidates. What are some interviewing skills that'll keep me from getting tricked during the interview? You'll learn how to discern between truth and fiction during the interview. Let's begin with this question. What do I look for to choose the best from the rest? To answer this question, it's important to realize that selling and servicing team members will be working in a high rejection, high activity environment. Now that we understand the sales environment, let's look at the relationship between income and sales activities. Team members need a monthly income goal. That's when bills are due. This income requires a certain dollar amount of monthly sales, which also requires a certain number of daily quotes. For example, let's say 8 quotes a day are necessary to reach $4,000 in total monthly income and $40,000 in monthly sales. Let's look at the importance of hitting the daily quote goal each and every day for a month. If your selling team member, let's call him Jay, has a 30-day income goal and needs 8 daily quotes to hit his goal, and he only has 4 quotes on Monday, thinking that he'll have 9 quotes the next 4 days to catch up. Well, then on Tuesday he only has 7. Now he's 5 quotes behind and has to add more quotes to his future daily totals. It's easy to see that in sales, whenever you get behind on the daily number of quotes, it's almost impossible to catch up because of the limited amount of time to work and the limited amount of time people are reachable by phone. So instead of reaching a monthly income goal, it takes Jay 40 days to hit his income goal. Reaching the daily quote goal takes a tremendous amount of disciplined focus and managing time and rebounding from rejection. Let's talk about rejection in selling. See, rejection is emotional pain. We're wired to avoid things that cause both physical and emotional pain. When prospects say no and the salesperson interprets the no as rejection, it may cause the person to want to avoid the tasks that cause the emotional pain. For example, phoning prospects. If a selling team member and a service team member who you want to pivot have a low resiliency to this rejection, they'll avoid making phone calls and spend their time on preparing proposals or paperwork, which results in too few quotes for the day or weak attempts to pivot. They satisfied their duty to be busy, but they were busy on the wrong task. We call this call reluctance. You must hire selling and servicing team members who can get over rejection quickly so that they will not avoid selling and pivoting activities, which leads to hitting their daily quote targets. What are the most important selling activities? Many people think of selling mostly in terms of presenting the product. Well, 90% of the difficulty of selling occurs on the front end of the sales process during the phoning time and at the end of the presentation getting the commitment, or we call this closing the sale. Phoning prospects is a time of intensified rejection because the prospect is not expecting the call and is busy doing something else. Also, since your products have delayed or little gratification, there's no emotional excitement about the products, so it's easy to procrastinate. So when prospects realize what the call is about, they start thinking of what to say to get off the phone or how they can deal with it later. The best-selling team members can break this preoccupation and procrastination and get the prospect interested in viewing a quote, then closing the transaction. Therefore, making an effective presentation is only 10% of selling. There are millions of people who can communicate product information. The selling team member who can phone and close is scarce and in high demand. And the servicing team member who can successfully pivot is also scarce. So when we say, can they sell, we're asking, can they have enough sales activities each day at a target closing ratio in order to hit their 30-day sales target? These activities are making a phone call that turns into a needs discovery conversation, that leads to presenting a quote, that leads to an application, and executing these steps in a pleasantly persistent way in order to get referrals to the customer's friends and family. If they can execute all of these steps enough times each day, they can sell. Here are 5 dimensions that must be measured to determine if a person can sell. It's important to keep in mind that we'll never hire perfection. But if we measure everyone against perfection, we'll know what areas that will need coaching and how much risk we're taking by hiring a candidate. The 5 dimensions are character, attitudes, motivations, personality, and sales skills. The first 4 dimensions predict the level at which a person will master sales skills. Character, attitudes, and motivations are formed in a person's environment. We use interview questions to discover the level of these 3 dimensions. Personality is genetic. We use the science of personality profiling to measure the level of hardwired personality traits needed for selling. Let's look at each of the 5 dimensions in greater detail. The most important trait of all is character. It's about what we do when no one is looking, an internalized compass of right and wrong, a code and standard for living. You want everyone on your sales team to represent your company well and serve your clients with integrity. Character is built in our past when parents and mentors teach us from a young age correct ways to behave and how willing we are to work on our own personal development as adults. We all have varying degrees of these traits, and it all depends on how much training we receive beginning at a young age. Psychologists tell us that character is formed mostly by the time we reach age 13. And if you really think about it, it makes sense. When our kids are teenagers, we're just trying to keep them alive. When they're in their 20s, we're just trying to help them not make mistakes that'll take them 10 years to recover from. The top 4 character traits are honesty. People are honest with themselves and others. A commitment to living with the consequences of the truth at all times. It's a willingness to record all information honestly on applications. Then there's work ethic. This is a demonstrated history of setting goals, developing a plan to reach the goals, and then executing the plan on time and at the goal level. Next is concern for others. This is a service attitude with humility. One believes, if I help enough other people get what they want, then I'll get what I want. And then there's accepts responsibility for the outcomes of their actions. This is the number 1 measure of receptivity to coaching. It's a belief, if it is to be, it's up to me. And when things go wrong, I admit my mistakes rather than blame others. People who don't accept personal responsibility for their actions are going to blame the company, their manager, the economy, their team, or someone else for their lack of success. They're unwilling to look in the mirror and self-analyze. Instead, they're always looking out the window for somebody else to blame for their lack of success. We measure these character traits first because character can't be coached. Candidates must bring high levels of these character traits to the table. Otherwise, they're going to be disruptive to your team and cause you to spend unnecessary time attempting to coach basic things like getting to work on time, recording honest information on applications, a service mentality, and being receptive to your coaching. Again, you can't coach character. During the interview process, once you discover that a candidate does not have any of these character traits, stop the process and move on. A top agent told me once that he started enjoying his career more once he started hiring character first. Let's look at how character is formed. That way we'll recognize it when we see it. It begins with having one or more parents who understand the balance between praise and approval and disapproval and discipline. Too much praise and approval, and a child grows up with an entitlement mentality. Too much disapproval and the wrong kind of discipline, and a child grows up with low self-esteem. With the right balance of both, we become adults with what psychologists are now calling high emotional intelligence. Well, that's just a fancy phrase for saying a person has high character. They're honest, they put others first, they work hard, and they don't blame others for their mistakes. Everyone has experienced some degree of character development. Think about a time when it was your responsibility to contribute to doing your part to take care of the family that you grew up in. Your story may be similar to mine. Growing up in the South in a large family of 5 children with very little money, we spent our summer vacations growing a large garden in order to have enough food to last us through the winter. Well, at a young age, it came my turn to plow the field in order to plant the garden. My mother showed me how to operate the rototiller and how to turn up the ground for planting. Well, she encouraged me that I was capable of the job, and she gave me the deadline of sunset to have this half-acre of ground plowed. Well, I was overconfident that I'd be finished by lunch, and I went to work. Well, after about 30 minutes of fighting what I considered to be Satan's plow, I was sweating and every muscle in my arms and back was reeking in pain. That's when my mom and I stepped into this loop of praise and approval and disapproval and discipline. I started complaining about how hard the ground was, the rototiller was too small, and how I was not really the person for the job. Well, she began to encourage me by telling me what a strong man I was and that she was confident that I was the right person for the job. Well, she also added in that if I didn't get back on the job, what discipline she was about to inflict on my body. We remained in this loop for the next 8 hours, back and forth, my complaining, her encouragement. At almost sundown, I leaned against the fence post, looked back at the plowed ground. I smelled the freshly plowed dirt and was overwhelmed with a sense of gratification for having stuck with the task. When we feel this sense of gratification created from having pushed through the sweat zone, we become bonded to the trait of hard work ethic. We also become bonded to the parent who mentored us through the process in a positive way. You all have these experiences. It might have been trying out and making the sports team, the dance team, the cheerleader squad, playing a musical instrument, or making good grades. The formation of the other character traits works the same way. When we choose a clear conscience over a guilty conscience, we become bonded to the character trait of honesty. When we experience close relationships as a result of treating others the way we'd like to be treated, we become bonded to the character trait of concern for others. When we make mistakes that result in bad things happening in our lives and we choose to look in the mirror and admit our mistakes instead of looking out the window for someone to blame, we become bonded to the character trait of personal responsibility. The more of these life experiences people have where they're bonded to all the character traits, the more emotionally mature they become. Relationships work better. Families work better. Communities are stronger. Nations are stronger, and the world is a better place. We become the teacher and begin to pass the character traits on to others. Now that we know where character comes from, We simply ask questions about each character trait to measure the degree to which candidates have these traits. We ask questions that get candidates to tell us stories, and the strength of their story will tell us the degree to which they have the trait. Here are some sample questions. Who had the greatest influence on you when growing up? Well, a person might say, well, it was my father. Well, you then ask, well, what did your father teach you about work ethic? Or what did your father teach you about concern for others or honesty? The strength of their story about the life lessons their father taught them was going to give you a sense at whether or not they have been exposed to the teaching necessary to build character. After we measure character, we then measure attitudes. Almost any psychologist will tell you that our belief about ourselves determines our behavior. They'll also tell us that honest people have a hard time performing job duties that are not aligned with their values. So based on these two psychological facts, there are two critical attitudes of the best salespeople. The first is the candidate's attitude toward salespeople. The other is the candidate's attitude toward using your products and services to solve the problems of your customers. The products they own and the process that they use to purchase them will reveal the image that they have of salespeople and their attitude toward your products and your industry. See, honest people, they can't sell what they don't own. So do the candidates see salespeople as generally worthy of respect, helpful, and deserving of success? What are the things in the candidates' lives that cause them to have a positive or negative view of salespeople? Have the candidates had personal and meaningful experiences in their lives that cause them to view your products and services in a positive light? Well, a person's buying habits will tell you this image that they have of salespeople and whether or not they appreciate the expertise that other salespeople provide them during the buying process. See, salespeople who don't see selling as a worthy profession, they're going to struggle to master sales skills, no matter how much you teach them, resulting in low sales activities, low closing ratios, and low sales production. Here are some sample questions to uncover these two attitudes. What's been your experience with purchasing or selling products like we sell? Or your experience with dealing with salespeople from our industry? A good answer to this question might be, well, my uncle was an agent with your company, and I've always admired how professional he is and how successful he was and how well he took care of my family growing up. Another answer to this question might be something like this, and an agent shared this answer with me that he actually heard during the interview. Well, I used to own products with your company, but I now own products with another company. Another question that you might ask is, are you ready to move all of your products to our company? A good answer to this question would be yes. Well, an agent reported to me that a candidate said to him in the interview, I don't know, my wife handles that decision. I'll have to check with her. He was interviewing to become a selling team member, and it had not occurred to him that if he were to get the job and start working the next day, that it would be important for him to own the products that he would be recommending to others. You'll be amazed at the revealing answers you'll hear when you ask the right questions. The next dimension we measure is motivations. We're told that millennials are motivated by free time and pleasure. We found that top salespeople are motivated by one or both of these things: living and providing at the highest income level for the job. They want or need the maximum amount of money the job is capable of paying. See, selling is just too hard, and the stress is just too great without this insatiable desire to be at a high income level. If your candidate can live on the base, they most likely will not work hard enough to make the maximum amount of commission you're willing to pay them. Living a certain lifestyle may not be what motivates them. If it's not, then they must be competitive. This is a strong desire to be the best that they can be at everything that he or she does. Winning is the only option. Competitive people want to be great at everything. It's everything they do. There's evidence in their lives. They desire excellence even in things like their hobbies and their volunteer work, their sports, their school. Everything they're involved in, they work hard to be their best. Now, people also need the character, skills, and personalities to move forward. We want to make sure that we're hiring the doer and not the dreamer. Here's some sample interview questions. What are some current and long-term needs that will be satisfied if you do this job well? Do they speak with passion about their financial goals and plans on reaching their goals? Or do they have an attitude of, I just want to get by, I just want to be comfortable? Another question might be, in order of priority, what are the 3 most important things in your life right now? Did they speak with passion about how their faith, family, and career, for example, is important to them? Or do they respond with shallow comments like, well, just mother, God, and country? We measure these 3 traits of character, attitudes, and motivations with many interview questions. And as we'll talk more about later, we began with asking questions on the phone to measure these areas using the phone screen questionnaire. As a person moves further down into the selection process, we have questionnaires in the Recruit the Best Field Manual that are labeled for each of these dimensions. As we're asking the questions, if the candidate is giving us strong answers, we continue to ask more questions. If at any point along the way it becomes clear that the candidate does not have the level of these traits that we need, we just simply stop the interview. And we just tell the candidate something like this. Thank you for answering my questions. I have all the information that I need at this point as I move ahead with my decision. Be very careful to not get drawn into a discussion about how well the candidate did during the interview. Just simply repeat that statement again and be very, very nice about it and just wrap up the interview and say goodbye. So you've measured character, attitudes, and motivations, and you decided that your candidate has all the right levels of these 3 dimensions. It's now time to measure the 4th dimension, which is personality.